And in West Africa, there are only 3 castles. And when I say castles, I'm referring to the largest slave dungeons. All these 3 is found here. So those of you coming from Accra, we have one in Osusu. That is the Christianborg Castle by the Danish. We also have Cape Coast by the British just here, and then Elmina by Portuguese. For the sake of time, I will try as I can to limit my presentation within the walls of these dungeons, but if time permits us, then we go beyond that. Now, Portuguese were here in 1471 to do 2 things: to trade and also to spread Christianity. They introduced what we call barter trade. That is, they were exchanging goods for goods. So they would come with mirror, sugar, alcohol, textiles in exchange for gold, ivory, and spices, among others. But the one major commodity that they were so much interested in at the time was gold. So at the rates they were getting it, gave them an impression that gold mine is found along this stretch and beyond. So they named or called this place Elmina. The proper Portuguese language went like Elmina, meaning the mine. But the locals couldn't say this properly, so it was corrupted as Elmina, now the name for this place. But I keep reminding people that those who listen fancy, everybody will learn to take it easy. Mansa, meaning inexhaustible water. Inexhaustible water. Get it? Yeah, but hardly you find this name in most of our books. All that you hear is Elmina, Edna, and others. But when you say Elmina, Edna, or Anamansa, or Amankau after the founder, it's the same place. Portuguese were in contact with our people 11 years before they approached the king of Edna or Elmina, telling him that we need a land where we could put up a fortress, and thus we are going to use this to protect our traders. We're going to use it to protect the trade. Initially, they were not in support. Ramna assesses the permanent presence of the Portuguese is going to create confusion among these 2. So he preferred that they should come and go. But they were, putting pressure. No, we did it. So finally, they give them a piece of land to put up this very fortress. And as years goes by, they were making additions. Initially, every room that you will see on the ground floor, this was meant for storage. However, in the early part of the 1500s, when the transatlantic slave trade began, these became dungeons where Africans were held captivity or were held in captivity for 3 months before they were sent out to the Caribbean and the Americas. For a period of 155 years, the Portuguese occupied Elmina Slave Castle. 110 years was used for slave trade. At a point, people far and near started accusing people of Amnomansa that they were the ones giving Portuguese safe haven to put up this very castle for the trade. So in their attempt to get them out from here, they collaborated with the Dutch. Interestingly, Dutch were not into Atlantic slave trade at the time. So they were thinking that as they were coming in, that the slave trade would stop. As soon as they captured it, they began making additions. It became what we say from frying pan to fire. Dutch continued with slave trade, and they were here for 235 years. Between Portuguese and Dutch, we are talking about some 325 years. In 1807, in 1814, British and Dutch respectively abolished slave trade. The Danish had done that 1803, by the point that they were operating on a very small scale. So when they stopped, it never affected the business. Dutch, British make some impact. But that was even on paper. The trade continued illegally for over 50 years. So in the 1870s, this very castle was no longer profitable for them. Dutch had lost interest. They had moved to somewhere in Indonesia. They sold all their possession in Gold Coast, now Ghana, to British. Now let me say that after the Berlin Conference of 1884, 1885, British had already in control of Gambia, Sierra Leone, Nigeria, Ghana. And eventually they had to colonize us also. So they were here up to 1957 when we had our independence. That's it, that's Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. 1960, we became republic. And remember, Dr. Nkrumah is one of the founding fathers, Pan-African, like that, and he's saying that it's about time we started finding solutions to our own problems. So he asked the British to go back home. Nearly 400 years of its history is connected with the Atlantic Slave. And this is what we're going to use. The spaces here, we'll link it with the story, and then we'll make progress. I know 45 minutes is not enough, so your questions are very important.
Thank you. Question, did Africans build this building themselves, or were Portuguese the people who actually constructed it?
They hired, on record, Portuguese had come here with over 600 people in 1482. But the point is that the effect of tropical diseases make it worse, so they have to resort to local labor. So we have people who are here being hired in construction. But let me say that this fortress was built before slave trade began. Among all of them, it was the first. I like questions, so now here after the tour, if you don't ask questions, we'll lock you in the dungeons. Any other question now? Now we go down. Let's go upstairs. And then the church. In the other room on the ground floor, these were the dungeons. And they had 600 male, 400 female, making 1,000 at a time. Now let's go to the female section. We come back, then we do the rest. And like I said, 400 women were shared in all this. So we're going to walk through. We are in the largest female dungeon. And here we could see the original floor they had, made of stones. There were no mattresses, there were no blankets. One could also touch and feel the original walls. But before one could get to this point, meaning he or she had already made several kilometers walk before getting here. Already they were weak. There were no toilets, facilities given, so they had buckets. And little food was given, something just to sustain them. In these dungeons, as we walk through these dungeons, we're going to see a lot of these wreaths. These were laid here in memory of several thousands and millions of people who went through the dungeons, those who died here, those who died through the Middle Passage, those who died on the plantations. In the African traditional societies, we believe that the dead or the departed ones are not gone. So as we walk through these dungeons today, as we tell the story, we are saying so in honor of them, and we say, may their soul rest. This is one of the 3 cisterns or reservoirs they had. But at the moment, we are not using it. They had pipes, such that when it rained, water came down. And let me continue saying that those Europeans who were here never came with their women. So they were sexually abusing the female. The one chosen might have been here for days, for weeks, for months, without cleaning her feet or let alone have a shower. So the soldiers had water from here, bathed her, and after she was sent through this entrance, there is a staircase which will take us to the governor's quarters. Now listen. We are not going up, but wanting to see how it is at the time. So this woman was made to go up, being escorted. But the point is that some of them became pregnant. They were separated, kept outside the castle. There were houses where she lived. So after having this baby, some years later, these kids were brought back. They go to school, work for the Europeans, and the mothers will continue to serve as domestic slaves. In most cases, they had light skin, what you may say, half caste or mixed race.
Based on the reality at the time, most of them wouldn't have been able to take back the children.
At the time, there were a lot of them, and each of this has a chain and a lock. Most of them, when chosen, they resisted rape. So this woman is chained to this ball. It's very heavy. That having two of this, very difficult for you to walk with it. So whenever it is raining, shining, that will serve as a punishment. They were doing so in order to put here in those ones or to break. We organized an experiment in this dungeon. Call it the return of the slaves. And the whole idea was for us to have a picture imagery how the dungeons was like at the time of slavery. So instead of 100 women, we had 60 volunteers. We locked them here for just 12 hours. You will see these were the pieces of clothes they had around them. They were in chains. We improvised, locking this door, saying that nobody is going out. For 12 hours, they were to do everything here. In the next morning, it became extremely difficult for someone to stay here just a minute because of the stench in the room. If what we did see 12 hours, and if we are saying that people were here for a week or a month or so, then we are saying that they went through conditions so horrible, saying that words can't adequate. One of them says she was lying somewhere here, then she felt that the clothes she had on around the waist was getting soaked, not knowing another person somewhere here had pee or had passed urine. So if this is to continue for a week, I keep saying that if this was just a controlled experiment, then it tells you that at a point that everybody is in chains, at a point that everybody is fighting for survival, you can imagine. I also have with me some of the original iron bars they had at this point. But because of the sea breeze, they were getting rusty. So we changed them and we put wood. You would agree that if those were the original ones, some of the captives. From here, we move to the door. We have had so many of these instances. People getting possessed, selling acting to me. And I had a mother and a son came here, and then that will be the point that brothers, sisters, or family in the dungeon, they are likely to see each other for the first time or the last time before they get on board the slave ship. Not too long ago, we were at this point. And as the ship were in, all the female captives were expected to descend or to walk down steps before they would get to the door of no return. But these iron bars, we fix them here. We fix them there, not too long, just to prevent accident that no one avoid. So at the time, as the female were moving down, the male were from this place. Here we continue. And we need to bend. One foot.
I have a question.
Okay.
Why are the entrances so small?
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, they must have had, large people too.
That's correct.
It's a history question.
Good. Now, this will be the last room ever captive ought to pass. And if from the main courtyard up to this point, to answer your question, one would notice that the door keeps getting smaller, like you said. The reason is that they want one person to come in at a time. That no one escapes, that they're able to control the traffic. So let me show you this. That was the height. Just look up. That was the height. But when slave trade began, I told you that the castle was built before slave trade began. So when it began, they reduced it this way.
Made it small.
And then let's narrow this up. Sorry. This is the door of no return. It was also wider. But when Atlantic slave trade began, it was also reduced this. Now people keep asking, what about if some of the captives were big? The point is that by the end of 2-3 months, they would have lost enough for it. And again, the sea was much closer. Today, it has So when they walk down, they get to the beach on the steps, they walk further, boat takes them from there to the ship, and the journey began. They were already weak, and that explains why a lot of them died in the process. We have several records, but one of them is saying that when you take every 3 captives, 2 died, 1 survived. Saying that some 20 million made it. So if we are to go by this ratio, then we are saying that some 60 million were involved, of which 40 million died.
Excuse me, what's this?
And then you want that. I said that was the height of the door.
No, I'm talking about this one. That was the height of the door.
That's it. So when slave trade began, then they reduced it to that.
Oh, okay.
So this was the whole door?
That was the whole door, yes. So that's one the later one to do too. Right. So you can see it.
I have another question.
Go ahead.
Why specifically 3 months of waiting?
Stay here for much longer. And so I want to talk about the average month. That one had to be the dance, but one could be less than a week or less than that.
So is it work is
As in the work we done to sort of figure out how they dispose of the dead, and maybe like DNA evidence to sort of make connection with the population, in the work like that have been done.
Yeah, not yet, but we are about the individual coming in doing DNA, and then it will link them to, Ghana or other places,
Right.
but not necessarily to a family.
right?
So it's like they're a burying ground, or they just kind of were arbitrary about disposing of the dead? The people who died here, like how did they dispose of the bodies?
Oh, that was what they were throwing in the sea. Yeah, just like on the slave ship. So while people were captured from all over,
All over, right?
and they marched them.
Right here.
But the point is that it is not only Ghana being the exiting,
Right.
but the majority of them went through because you have a lot of these forts and castles in here.
But isn't it accurate that strong tribes were preying on weaker tribes and like selling them, like bartering with the slave traders?
Yeah, the fact is this. Before, let me put the question this way. Tribes were attacking tribes,
Yeah.
right? And people will say Africans were capturing Africans and selling them as slaves, right? Okay, let me put the situation. The point is that if you look back at history, before or when the Europeans were not here, there is no way on the record which says that Africans were capturing other Africans across the Atlantic and to be sold as slaves. There's no there on the record. But there were some sort of domestic, slavery in the African system. And that, once seen as a slave, has his right, freedom, everything intact. And when the European came, one of the three that they used that word so well for them was what I would say to divide. So you are so seen to be a servant or a vassal state to that kind of kingdom. So every year you pay annual wage, something like that. So the system was different.
So there was no slave trade, is what you're saying, before the Europeans?
There were, if I had to use the word slave trade or slavery, if you're not that, this person has a problem.
Africans enslaved other Africans, but chattel slavery.
Good, that was the word. So we call it the indentured. Indentured 772. That's the one that was here. That was what I was looking for. That's correct. That's the gist today. Yeah, that's it. So it took different dimension, different form.
They weren't sending them on ships.
No, sending them on
the high seas.
High seas. So when the New World was discovered and they attempt to get more laborers to work, and they had to resort to using the Africans. Whatever they can do. I'm trying to say that. All right.
Man, good history lesson.
Yeah. Let's go ahead. We're not done. We have a lot more to see.
This is a fitting and appropriate ending to this discussion of the castle at Elmina in everlasting memory of the anguish of our ancestors. May those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. May humanity never again perpetuate such injustice against humanity. We, the living, vow to uphold this everlasting memory that the inhumanity that was unleashed on the African ancestors during the chattel slave trade to the Americas was maybe one of the biggest crimes against humanity. And I think we should all be able to say never again, because this certainly a monumental crime against humanity, and some people, some black people, some people in the diaspora are still living with the vestiges of the savagery that was imposed on the African people by the Europeans who came and perpetuated the African slave trade. We Africans at home and abroad must provide information to our children, informing them of these atrocities that were committed. We must, as Africans at home and abroad, ensure that the world never forget that chattel slavery is the worst criminal act that has ever visited upon humankind. The worst criminal act that has ever visited on humankind, bar none. We should never forget, and we must ensure that generations to come are adequately informed about the tragedy that befell the ancestors of Africans in the diaspora, Africans in the Caribbean, Africans in the Americas, Africans wherever they're found, at home and abroad. Never again should this injustice be perpetuated.